Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Experience podcast, inside the business, buzz, and brilliance of Black entrepreneurs. Here is your host, Dr. Frances Richards.
What happens in Vegas goes all over the world on Black Entrepreneur Experience, episode number 467. Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black Entrepreneur Experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. Divergent CRO, they are excellent in clinical research, managing trials as they pioneer a transformative path towards a healthier and more equitable future. Welcome, Shawn and Abiel.
Thank you.
I've given our audience such a brief bio. Why don't you fill in the gaps and share with our audience what you'd like them to know about you and your company?
I could start. My name is Abiel. My interest generally in research actually started with my grandma having Alzheimer's. My interest was just picked to see what was being done to help people with Alzheimer's at the particular time. And I started volunteering and participating in any type of runs that they have, like, in Atlanta, just running and just seeing any way that I can contribute. Then I learned about the clinical research industry. One thing that was common for all three of us was that we were able to notice the disparity within clinical research, especially the unserved or unmet population that relates to African Americans specifically and other people of color as well. So with that, we found a common ground that led or birthed Divergent CRO to be able to breach the gap, bringing in more people that are underserved because they are not aware of research first, or they are not privy to the information that lets them know that, okay, yeah, I also qualify for certain trials that are going on and things like that. And re-educating people, we know there's like a trust issue as well with research. And that's the main focus for us, is to be able to have representatives, to be able to represent at the forefront so that people will know that, yeah, we are here too. There are doctors in research that are of color. There are many people that are already volunteering, just bringing that information to the table. That is our overall idea.
And I kind of went a roundabout way, and it's just a little story for myself. I wanted to be a doctor, specifically a pediatrician. And in high school, I was in a program called Health Academy. So I did everything I could do. Crossed my T's, dotted my I's. I was in all of the science classes, math classes, and I knew I was going to be a doctor. I did okay, very well enough to get accepted into a program at one of the HBCUs, which was Howard, and be able to start studying for the MCATs. That will allow me to go into first after college. When I went to college, so from high school to college, then I got into a program for the MCATs so I can take it to the next level for medical school. So I got to Howard. The first week was great. They acclimated all of the students to the campus. And then the second week, they introduced us to the lab. And when we were introduced to the lab that Monday, I walked in, they opened up the door, they revealed the cadaver, and I passed out. And at that point, when I woke up, I knew that I was not going to be a pediatrician. And I got a ticket to go back home. And as a young person, there was a biotech company in my area in Oakland, California. I volunteered and got a job there, worked in the records department. And I kept seeing people going in and out that was not of color, but I dared to ask the question. And the question was, what do you do? And I was told that they said, I am a clinical research associate. What does a clinical research associate do? Well, we go to the sites, we monitor the data for the company that you're working for, a very company that you're working for, a biotech company, to be able to get the FDA to approve drugs. And then the next question was, what kind of degree do you need? You just need a science degree. And I was like, wow, that opened up another option to me. and which even to this day is very little they're not promoting that option. It's more either you be a doctor or a nurse or something. Is they're not mentioning too much about clinical research. It's not very widespread. It came a bit as a surprise, but surprisingly, it was exciting for me because I was able to stay in the medical field through research and be able to help from that advantage point without having to touch a patient, but be able to look at the records, the medical records and all of the data to ensure that the patient is safe. So that's how I got into this beautiful world of industry of clinical research. And from that, based off of some of my family was having cancer, I decided to become more interested in oncology. And that's where I am today, where I monitor and have looked at clinical trials in oncology.
Thank you. I was on mute. Can you tell me what you're doing individually and collectively as a company and individuals to actually share this information, evangelize, if I should use that word, about more individuals that look like us to get involved in clinical research?
One thing that we do that's coming is preparing articles with research-backed articles that we can share via our social media as well as our website linked together so that people can find that and see the information that's out there. And also one program that we have, since my colleague, my partner as well, Shawn, she specializes in oncology. So we have the ONCRA Oncology CRA training. It's intended to bring in people of color, people that are not open or they are not having this information as an option, as she rightfully mentioned earlier, that they can see it. We are going to HBCUs, reaching out to them to align with their program or career fairs, to reach out to them, to bring them in, to open this option to them. Like, you can learn about research. The same thing that you can do in the hospital, in the medical field, it's also transferable into the research industry, because you can be a doctor, you can be a nurse, you can be a research coordinator, you can be a nurse practitioner, whatever the case may be. The role that you have in the hospital is transferable to the research industry. Then we have the Bridge program. That is our way of bringing in people that are CRAs, the role that she learned about when she was in biotech. We created a program called Bridging the Gap. It is to bring people that may be interested once they learn through the community outreach or education that they want to do it right from college. Those that are in science background, we are reaching out to them and informing them about this opportunity so they could also join our company, because we will train them and then give them opportunity to work with us directly.
And to expand a little bit on it, there's, for our communities, marginalized communities, people of color, from all gamuts of people of color, it's important that we understand, or that the community understands, that there is a lack of participants of color in clinical trials, which is alarming and can be detrimental to our communities. And the reason why, and I just for an example, just first of all, to start with, 87% of the clinical trials that have been approved are approved through Caucasian people, that the basis of the research have been with them. 67% are white males. So it is genetically understood that we have different genetics, that variations, and they're definitely what some type of medicine for the major population is definitely has a different effect on our communities. And there's an issue with that, because when we go to the healthcare areas, when we go to the clinics, wherever we go, we don't see us. And that's definitely, I believe, can be a deterrent for any marginalized person or people, that why would they want to participate in clinical trials if they don't see someone like us, if they don't see us getting the data or bringing them in to take the blood pressure. So it's we want to open up and make the community aware that there are options out there and that we do need more people of color in the industry to help change it. Now, based on that, also, the FDA has requested or put out a guideline for recruitment and retention of marginalized people. They put that out in April 2022 and asked that the sponsors, biotechs, device companies, make a plan to include us in their clinical trials.
When you talked about bridging the gap, your Bridging the Gap program, someone's listening and they are interested in your program or connecting with your company. How should they connect?
So they could find us on our website, divergentcro.com, or via LinkedIn. Those might be. We also have social media handles as well. Just Divergent CRO would be fine to be able to search us, and they can reach us there. Yeah, but more information is actually very detailed on our website if they go there under the training section.
Which is divergentcro.com. And that will lead them to all types of resources that we have.
You mentioned cancer, oncology, you mentioned Alzheimer's, and someone's listening. And when we talk about the medical field and we're talking about clinical research, why should we really care? Shawn, you touched on that a little bit. I want you to really go in depth. And when you talk about someone, they're doing a clinical trial and no one is representing that looks like me or my 96-year-old mother, but that's so high level. Let's go down a little bit lower. Someone's listening and like, why should I get involved in a clinical trial? Or how do I get involved in a clinical trial? Where do I start and why?
That's a very, very good question. Well, where you would start is clinicaltrials.gov. That is a site where you can go and look for any type of clinical trial of interest. If your 96-year-old grandmother has diabetes or your cousin Ernie, whoever, you just start at clinicaltrials.gov and punch in whatever type of disease state that you are interested in. And I guarantee you there is a clinical trial out there that will be out there that you might can participate, or there's a future clinical trial that's coming up. So that is very good because we don't know sometimes where to start. And you're right. Is there clinical trials? What is a clinical trial? And basically, it's clinical trials, as you know, is something that the pharmaceutical companies has a drug of interest for, let's just say diabetes, and they want to test this particular drug in populations, and you have different stages. So you start from phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. There's a whole gamut. So you definitely, and to let people know that the phase 1 is starting at a very, very low dose, probably normal population, very small population, maybe 10 people. So, and then they step it up. And also the regulatory compliance around there to ensure that there's nothing, that they are being handled well, that everything has a procedure that's in place. It's not like it was, I don't know, in the 1900s, 1932s or whatever, where there wasn't a lot of regulation. That's very important to understand that it is a regulated process industry that is looking at variations of genetics for different populations to help the medicine to upgrade or have a different type of effect and what that medicine will look like for that person in the body. We're so quick to go to a hospital and take their medicine. And I know of my family members, diabetes, they take a particular medicine and it's horrible on them. Their bodies are affected differently, but they would never know that it would be like that because we're not taking participation in the clinical trials. And we're not forcing anyone in clinical trials, but we're saying that is an option and that it is regulated. And that's where they can start is at clinicaltrials.gov. Abiel, do you have anything to say?
Yes, if I could add quickly just about getting involved. Like our company motto says, today's research is tomorrow's solution. I believe that if we as a people also want change as it relates to our health, the medical field, we have to get involved. And this is why one of our approaches representation. The more we see our people in leadership in the industry, the more people become more educated, it become more desensitized to the idea that this is dangerous for me. Rather, educate ourselves to know for ourselves. Because if you are going to take the medicine anyways for your health, then you should be able to participate in it to know how you will react to it. This is what the volunteers, those volunteers, those patients, they actually are making a huge difference. But we need people, more of us, as she's mentioned earlier, we have different biological makeups. So taking something that is not tested or observed on us will not necessarily provide its result, because what is the trial about? It's about efficacy of the product. So if that is not tested because we don't have representative, we cannot see the result the way it should. But then the same drug is prescribed for everybody. Everyone that have that ailment or sickness or disease, whatever you call it, they are prescribed something similar. So just people becoming more educated about research alone will bring more people. And for that, the people that volunteer in this generation may be saving lives in the next generation. Because what is perfected today, so many people ongoing will continue to use it in order to avoid the same prevalence.
And I just have one thing to say. We had a COVID-19 worldwide clinical trial. And it's just kind of funny that the FDA put out the guidelines in April 2022, where you can go on Google it from any perspective. They have found that there were differences of how the Black community was reactions towards the COVID-19 shot. So right there in their face, you saw the different genetic effects, genetically, the shot, how it affected the Black community population. And that in itself tells us that it is very critical that we participate more, marginalized people participate a little bit more into clinical trials. But as Abiel says, how do you start? Getting the information out there, letting the community know this is where you go. There's options out there for careers.
So, as a company, who is your ideal client?
Ideal client, biotechs, device companies, clinical sites, universities. But the biggest ones we believe are the critical ones that we would like to work with is with the biotechs and device companies.
What problem exists in the world today that you would like to solve?
If I could say what problem exists in the world, I will put it on what Shawn loves working on, oncology. Like, some cases are close to home. We have a close family of ours that's actually have someone dealing with that now. And if there can be a one-stop solution, I'm pretty sure we'll all be happy that, someone is able to beat cancer just by taking a pill or an injection. I mean, it will be some sort of happiness, something that is conquered, that no one have to sit through the process of chemotherapy and all this, losing your hair, not being able to eat, and all the things that happen to them along the line. If it can just be one pill, one dose, or even regular doses, and they know that the cancer disappears, I think a lot of people will be much happier.
I agree.
You're a startup as a research company. Talk about raising capital.
Well, the way we're raising capital is bootstrapping. My partners, Dr. Shaw, Abiel, and myself, we are just putting a pool together and ensuring that we have the necessary resources. Of course, we could definitely stand to have more capital in the pool at this point, but right now that's where we stand. We don't want to have big investors or anyone in the situation or in the pool because we want to make sure that we're able to have a organizer, I'm saying, or have a leadership in our company where we're definitely helping our community and helping the people who work at Divergent CRO. We want to have a different philosophy, definitely taking into consideration mental health wellness and just ensuring that everyone is feeling good about what they do out there.
Speaking of mental wellness, talk about mental wellness and entrepreneurship.
Mental wellness and entrepreneurship together is extremely important. You have to be definitely fit physically and mentally when you are out there working, building a business, working for a corporation. Mental wellness has to be a part of that, and considering that, especially in these times, we know that as far as for our community, and that's a Black community and a Black woman, mental wellness and dealing with the different aspects of how we work or different our families, our friends, and how we have to shift in different modes to be a part of our community, a part of our families, and excel in a certain way, that definitely is taxing mentally. So we definitely take that Divergent CRO, take that into consideration, and we are crafting different ways that we can ensure that everyone is being honored for what they do. They're able to talk. We have different discussions. The first thing that when I was working with Dr. Shaw is when she would come on to the meeting calls with the CRAs, the first thing she would say is, "How are you doing? How are you feeling today? Is there anything you would like to talk about?" Now, I know it's a business and we have to continue to run a business, but Dr. Shaw, ran it from a perspective of making sure that you have to be healthy. You have to be mentally healthy and physically healthy. And then we can start talking about the work, because then you can do a better job and excel in what you're doing in your craft.
What is something that we as consumers don't know about the clinical research industry that we should know?
I think I touched on it a little bit, that when I'm sitting back and just thinking for myself, and someone says clinical trials to me, I'm like, okay, so what is that? I remember, or are you talking about where the Black men experienced that issue within the syphilis, the Tuskegee syphilis trial? And then once, and there's other examples. And then once you start talking about that, then it goes into a whole different conversation. And what I touched on earlier is that nowadays, because of that unfortunate incident of the Tuskegee syphilis trial in Black men, that was like a 40-year trial, that now is more regulated. It's regulatory compliance, GCP, good clinical practices. There's a lot of processes and procedures in place to ensure that the patient is safe. That's the number one critical thing, is that the patient is safe. And that's something that I don't think the community knows about, is that there is a whole regulatory process to protect them.
And it's interesting when you talk about that the patient is safe. And in this climate, 2024, and we're looking at the healthcare system, and it looks like it's a rapid decline versus an elevation and increase of perfectionism. And we know that when you're talking about medicine or a physician, they're practicing physicians.
Mm-hmm.
With COVID-19, and it just seems like it's just taken a toll on the healthcare system in terms of employment, we know nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to our audience about reassuring them that even with the decline or having some gaps, I want to use that word, in the healthcare industry, why they should still push towards clinical trials and research, in advocating for research, supporting research.
Mhm. Very, very good question. I believe in order to get a fair chance at healthcare for our communities is that we have to participate more into clinical trials. And the reason why, and an example that I gave, you have a headache that went through a clinical trial. You have a body ache, you've been diagnosed with diabetes or arthritis, you go to the hospital, they prescribe you a pill. Okay, well, you're taking those medications just by simply of trust that you've been told by the doctor that this is going to help you. But you remember when you hear these commercials, they'll say that take this whatever, and then they have in little print they say this is this, it could affect this, and you might have to do this, and those are called adverse events. So what I'm saying is that all of these adverse events are being catered towards a main population. Just imagine if they're saying all of these types of events, like adverse events that can happen, what is happening to marginalized people? What happens when they go to the hospital and they take that pill? So they found that it could happen here, but do they really know what's really happening here? Is it more detrimental, or is it good, or is it better? Because based on the genetic variants, how we're built, that we can accept a certain type of medication. So I think that is extremely important that we participate in clinical trials, and keeping in mind that we are helping for future generations. Now, I know that, I'm not saying all clinical trials are great. I mean, and that there can be some adverse events. Let's be real. However, we won't know until we are there and we're participating to see how we can actually help our people in our communities.
There are so many brands and businesses that are dominating. Talk about a brand or a business that's dominating that you admire and why.
Well, I believe that the brand for me that I believe that's dominating, there's a couple of biotechs that are dominating in the DEI space, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of them, I'll just say a couple of them. There's Johnson and Johnson, there's Genentech, there's Amgen. They particularly have programs in place, DEI programs in place that are helping getting out the word to the communities about different clinical trials, and they want to include our communities. I think so their brand, and any of the brands that have these types of companies, such as the ones that I mentioned, are extremely good because they know it's important. And I do remember that one of them is not clicking in my mind right now, but before the FDA 2022 guidelines, they were already including it. Matter of fact, it was Genentech. They were already having diversity programs to include communities. So they understood that it's important as well. Those are the companies that I look at that are doing good business with us.
Talk about your top two mentors. What lessons did they teach you?
Well, I remember the first mentor when I was very young in the field as a CRA, and I was a novice CRA, and she said to me, when she was a senior CRA, because you have different levels in that too, just like any job, you have a level 1 entry, 1, 2, 3 senior. So she was a senior CRA, and she said to me, when you finally do get that title as a senior CRA, do not let them take that from you. Because in our industry, you can have, they'll call it one thing, but it's another thing. She said, no, you always stick to what you've been given and don't let them take your title because you worked for that. My second mentor said to me, as you are monitoring going out into the field, going to the clinics, looking at the patient data, always keep in mind or try to think, how would you feel, when someone is or looking at your records and making a decision about if you are doing well in their clinical trials and how they feel, and take, have a little compassion as you are going through the data. You can, when you're a doctor or nurse, you're right there with the patient. But with me, I'm right there with the information that they collect from the patient. And I can see exactly what they're going through because you have to take lab tests. You have to take other different tests and have that documented, and it tells a story about you. And so I always try to keep that in mind about the story of the patient and where they're coming from, to keep myself humble and have compassion, and to, really root for the patient and hoping that this particular clinical trial will get them to the next phase, which is always a better quality of life and also possibly an extension of their life if we're talking about cancer.
Let's talk about artificial intelligence and your industry. What is the impact and how do you use artificial intelligence in your industry?
Well, artificial intelligence just came on the scene and it's a lot of things to work out, but it's not bad things to work out. What I understand is that for medical and for legal, that the Chat GTP 4 that they just released, they're able to do a lot of screening and things for the patient or for in that industry right away, which helps any biotech company or device company be able to make more informative decisions on where they're going to, how they write their protocols. Now, a protocol is a document that structures all the clinical procedures and assessments for the patient as they're going through the clinical trial. What AI can now probably, I'm seeing in the for future, scan that protocol and take that protocol and compare it to the different patients at a medical office and immediately pick up and say, that patient is perfect for this clinical trial. And then be able to reach out to patients proactively and say, are you interested in this clinical trial? Because usually now we're getting the information out. We're hoping that the person goes to clinicaltrial.gov. They see all the different types of things and they reach out to us. Now with AI, we believe that the AI can be able to go to the medical records once it understands the different layers of the clinical protocol and then say this patient, that patient, they qualify. So then we reach out to you. I think that proactivity it will help and possibly can save lives.
What is your zone of genius?
Wow, a zone of genius. I like that. Well, first of all, I have to say this, starting with compassion and being able to really zone into when I'm going through the clinical trials and the medical records and the patients, to be able to really see areas of what is really affecting this patient and being able to document that clearly so that it will help the physician and the nurse and ultimately the sponsor when they are working on approving that drug. So my zone of genius is being able to, I don't know if you can call it a intuition. I'm just going to have to say that spiritually, like an intuition of being able to be connected and knowing what's good for the patient in a sense and how we can really help. And I find because I'm so deeply connected into ensuring that the patient is safe and that we are able to do good for that patient, it just makes me very happy to see that. I believe that's where my zone of genius is just compassion and foreseeing to help the patient.
Advice you wish you had followed.
That's great. So the advice I would have followed. Dr. Richards, she's just stumping me right now. The advice I would follow, and I'm just thinking back when I was young and I wanted to, I was so gung ho. I want to be a doctor. I just want to be a doctor and that's it. For us, you have to really evaluate why you want to be a doctor. And it usually stems from I want to help, unless you are a cosmetic surgeon or whatnot. But anyway, so the advice wish I would have followed is that sometimes that you have to also look at different options for yourself and not just be gung ho about one thing, because you can do something and for whatever reason, course change. And you have to be adaptable and flexible. And in this industry, that is very critical. And so that's the advice, is that being adaptable and flexible, because anything can change at any given moment. And it all is based off of what is happening with the patient when they're taking the experimental drugs for possible approval.
What's next for Divergent? What is on the horizon for you all?
What is next? Well, the next step that we are rooting for is to align ourselves with the potential biotech companies, device companies that really sees the value of implementing DEI practices. I do know that we have made some great collaborations with another international CRO group that is definitely willing to help us be able to expand out not just here domestically, but internationally. We also have made partnerships with some SMO groups, which means these are practicing physicians, Black, people of color, different actual sites that have, you see people of color there that can help assist with clinical trials. And then also one other collaboration, which we think is very awesome, is that we have partnership with you say that they send out people to collect the blood, which is very crucial. So if the patient can't go into a clinical site to be tested, then we have a collaboration where we can have them go to their homes in their comforts and get those samples, which is a huge collaboration and will make it easy, I believe, on all of the clinical trials that some of the biotech companies are doing.
Shawn, if you conducted this interview, what is the one question you would have asked yourself? I want you to ask the question and answer it.
I think the one crucial question that I would ask myself is, we've set up Divergent CRO, we have the resources, we're ready to go. And why did myself and our partners decided to take this venture into the awareness of clinical trials and working with sponsor companies? So why? So the big question to us, all of this, why? And my answer to that is that, and I believe I'm connected to my partners as well. When we set to do this venture, was the why is to help our communities, have them become more aware of what the options are that they have in clinical trials, and to set out to make a difference in medicine by understanding the genetic variants in our communities and be able to be proud of that and know that those differences, that's what makes us proud to be who we are and to celebrate that. So the why is for us to get together as a community and help the next generation and then help the next generation. And it keeps moving forward. We see that this company is going to be off as a legacy, because we really want to implant into the community that is important that we participate and we stop being afraid, stop listening to the misconceptions, and really do some good for themselves and for us, just in period.
Speaking of legacy, when it's all said and done, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as someone who really which I do, is very compassionate, very passionate about seeing a difference, a positive difference in our communities and getting the necessary help that we need in all phases or different aspects of our lives. If we're going to take the medicine and if we're going for mental health, mental wellness, we definitely have to know who we are. And that's a big question. Who are we and what can we contribute to the society? And I hope to be able to reveal that in a humble way that will make every community or marginalized communities be noticed. Right now, we're not being noticed, and we should be.
We've come to the part of our interview. It's called Fun Facts Lightning Round. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I'd like you to give me very quick answers. If there's something that you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass. Are you ready for the Fun Facts Lightning Round?
Yes.
What is your favorite comfort food?
Thai food.
You relax doing what?
Foot reflexology.
The last movie you saw?
The Accountant.
Your favorite singer or rapper?
I have to go with Anita Baker.
Your favorite dance song?
Pass.
What food you eat every week, no matter what?
Shrimp.
Work out or hit the couch?
Work out. I do dynamic stretch and I do aqua aerobics.
Thank you so much, Shawn Williams, for joining us on Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast. Before we let you go, share with our audience the best way for them to connect with you, to do business with your company, and feel free to leave all your social media handles.
Thank you. So the best way, I appreciate that. So the best way to connect with us is to go to our website, which is divergentcro.com. Right there, you'll see all of our various social media handles. The most important one that I believe is the LinkedIn social media handle. Please feel free to connect with us through LinkedIn and message us, and we'll definitely get back to you. Also, on the website, it'll show you the 800 number that you can call us and have any discussion. And I just want to put out a special message is that we are definitely reaching out to I have in college, the juniors. They're at a critical point in their juncture of what they want to do in science. And please feel free, have your parents or anyone to contact us just to venture off and get another perspective. And other than just the doctor, nurse perspective, but also clinical research and see if there's something that might spark with you. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. That's a wrap.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to Black Entrepreneur Experience. We would love for you to leave a review and rating on iTunes and share with your friends. For show notes and more episodes, go to www.beepodcast.com. Join us next Wednesday, and remember, green is the new black. So keep your bank accounts and your business in the black.